Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Melissa. I'm from BigPanda, and I'm excited to welcome you to this special session with our CEO and co-founder, Assaf Resnick. IT operations are facing a critical moment marked by growing complexity, rising costs, and outdated manual workflows. In the next 30 minutes, Assaf will share BigPanda's vision for how enterprises can really meet this moment with intelligence, automation, and scale. We're glad you're here. Assaf, thank you for being here. Let's get started and over to you.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Let me share my screen. Good to see everyone. Let's jump right into it. So, Big Panda, our mission as a company, it's to empower the teams that keep the digital world running. We work with large enterprises, the largest financial services companies, the largest insurance companies, the largest airlines, and on in the world. And our customers are the ones in operations who have to keep all the digital services running that power the business. So think about, the airlines that we support. Um, Transport over 250 million people a year across the globe. And every one of those airlines has tens or multiple dozens of mission critical services that if any one of them is down for more than 15 minutes, the whole fleet gets grounded. And as I'm sure everyone on this call can attest, there's a very special place in hell for airlines that keep their passengers stranded at the airport. Turns out that it's not good for business, it's not good for brand loyalty, it's not good for revenue. It's just really, really bad. And so our customers are the ones who have to keep those mission critical services running so this doesn't happen. And that's getting harder and harder to do. Most of our customers have very large scale, very large complexity. Most of them still have, multi-generational IT stacks. So many still have mainframes. Many still have traditional data centers with traditional monolithic applications. But as they're doing new things, they're using hybrid cloud. They're using microservices, CI/CD, DevOps, all these new technologies and resources and ways of working that are a source of agility and velocity and innovation. And that's great. But for the folks in operations who have to keep the lights on, it's a huge challenge because you have many orders of magnitude more moving parts. They're moving faster, they're breaking faster, there's more fragmentation. So it's really, really hard to understand the big picture about what's going on with your business in the scale of this growing data tsunami. And it's made even more difficult by the fact that the folks in operations are still deploying a very manual approach to understanding all this data and responding, detecting all these issues and responding to all these issues. So whether you're talking about traditional L1 operations, or you're talking about the SMEs in your organization who have to deal with major incidents, your developers, your SREs, your cloud engineers, it's still very manual, slow, error prone, expensive, and very difficult to scale processes that are bumping up this growing tsunami of IT data, both in scale and in fragmentation and velocity. So, what is our solution? How can agentic AI help with all of this? So, let's turn to, I obviously spoken with a lot of IT executives around, where do they have pains and where can agentic AI solve the most burning problems? You speak with over 100 executives, and you start seeing repetition, and you start seeing trends. So trend number one I hear over and over again is, "Hey, my L1 operations is super inefficient. I have tens or hundreds of L1 operators, sometimes thousands. Their job is to detect and respond to the hundreds or thousands of potential incidents I see every day. and hopefully within 15 minutes, very quickly gain situational awareness about what's happening. Do I need to escalate this to someone else? Can I fix this myself? Lots of money being spent there, and it's very, very poor ROI. And despite all of that spending on L1 operations, I'm still seeing 50% of my issues discovered by my service desk, by customers calling in. So, this is a very bad state of affairs. I'm spending a ton of money and getting very slow and error-prone results in return. Can agentic AI bring, acceleration and automation? Can it help me with this problem set? And the answer is yes. Problem number two, I'm hearing from a lot of CIOs and other execs, is when I do have a major incident and it goes into the hands of my SMEs, my L2s, my L3s, my developers, DevOps, SRE, that becomes fighting those major incidents is a super inefficient exercise because data is buried in all sorts of silos across teams and tools, and oftentimes buried in people's heads. So it involves a lot of baton handoffs, a lot of phone calls, a lot of reassignments to different teams. Oftentimes it involves very messy bridge calls with over 100 people that go on for many, many hours while people try to verbally discuss what they know and what might be relevant for this issue. And, we get a lot from our customers. Hey, can you help fix this problem? Can you empower these SMEs to get, access to all of the data in my organizational footprint, including, things that are unstructured data, including tacit knowledge, and you can help them, fight those fires for major incidents much, much faster, and can you give them the predictive capabilities to prevent those fires from happening in the first place? Um, and finally, I hear from a lot of execs is, hey, I've got these two operating modalities in my enterprise, and they have a very unhappy marriage. They don't work well together. On the one hand, I have operations. They tend to be horizontal and have ownership for infrastructure. They're ITIL based. They work out of ServiceNow. And on the other hand, I have my distributed operations, my developers and application owners, and I have hundreds or thousands of these teams. And they also get called in when a major incident happens. And, they're not ITIL, they're doing DevOps or SRE. They don't live in ServiceNow, they live in Jira or Slack or Teams and whatnot. And these two teams do not collaborate well. They don't have good shared processes. They don't have good shared data. They don't have good shared visibility. Can you help me? And this divide is causing me a lot of pain. The only time these two modalities meet is in bridge calls. Can you help me put them on a common plane? So whatever processes and actions and data, each individual team it has access to, can you share that across the organization and bridge this divide? And so that really informs our vision behind agentic IT operations is really staying very true to those pain areas. So we're really focused around one, fully automating L1 operations, making it, a layer that is much faster, make smarter decisions, only escalate what needs to be escalates, and can you do it, much, much more efficiently. Two is can we empower all of your SMEs across your organization to fight fires way more intelligently, to be, have access to all of the information that's buried across my silos so I can get to situational awareness and make decisions much, much faster. And I can create automation to avoid those problems in the first place. And then finally, can you help me unify those fragmented teams? Can you bring together my L1 operations and my distributed operations onto a common platform? That's our vision. And so it looks like this, one part at the top left, which is AI detection and response. And that's really meant to bring, full automation to level one operations. And I'll go into that in much more detail. And then there's our AI Incident Assistant, which we nicknamed Biggie, which is really meant to turbocharge distributed operations for all of the SME teams. And all of the, and both of those are on a common IT knowledge graph, which really, serves multiple purposes, both to harness, 10x more data than it was ever possible, and to bring those two teams together, to give them a shared data plane in which to have shared visibility and processes. So let's get into all of that. So, before we get into the individual solutions, let's talk about the IT knowledge graph. We're in a moment right now where, because of AI, enterprises need to really rethink their data strategy. And this is true for IT ops. It's true for every industry, but it's very, very poignant for IT ops. Because, for the last 50 years, if you look on the left-hand side, human workflows and automation for those workflows, especially automation that was built by consultants or engineers, rules-based automation that says, hey, if I see this trigger, go do this action. To do all of that, you could really only rely on highly structured data. And so, so that meant you had to look at, all the data that was driving your automation and your processes was very narrowly defined by, what can fit into these highly structured data formats. So one was observability and event management. So it's, hey, everything I'm seeing about this issue, I'm seeing through the lens of an alert that's in the payload of my observability tool, coupled with my CMDB. What does my CMDB have to say about this asset, the CI, and its relationship with other assets? And that's really kind of the lens through which automation was powered, because rules-based automation, couldn't deal with unstructured and semi-structured data. But now, as you're moving into AI reasoning, you're really moving from, rules-based, from rules to reasoning. And AI reasoning, yes, it can make sense of highly structured data, but it also does really, really well with semi-structured data and unstructured data. And that's a real revolution, because it lets us rethink from an IT automation perspective, what is the data that we can harness to drive smart automation? For the last 40 years, this is the data that you could harness. Whatever data drove automation, it had to be an event of some kind, typically an alert from your observability, some observability tool, enriched by what's in your CMDB. And that's really was the universe of the data that could drive automation. But if now, with AI reasoning, we can leverage all that semi-structured and unstructured data, well, there's 95% more data out there across the landscape of a large enterprise that you can use to drive smart decision making. And when you look at the $220 billion a year that enterprises spend on operation salaries, L1 operations, what are those people doing? They're looking at all the unstructured, tacit pieces of information that's buried across the enterprise, and they're trying to piece that together into context. Well, now with AI, you could do that automatically. You can do that at scale. And you do that at a level of effectiveness that humans just not capable of. And so, in addition to the data, you now have knowledge. So if you're having an issue, wouldn't it be nice to say, hey, have I seen an issue like this before in my service management practice? Uh, Collaboration history. Hey, have we chatted about this recently? Is there some kind of bridge call transcript where someone might have said something very relevant about this issue 6 months ago? And can I harness that? Do I have run books? Do I have informal knowledge? Do I have knowledge-based articles that may be relevant to this issue at hand? And so now there's a whole layer of knowledge that you can unlock to drive automation that you couldn't do before. Plus, there's a whole layer of knowledge that comes from AI sensing that we were literally blind to. You didn't know it existed. So, for example, service desk observability. A lot of our customers say, hey, half of my issues are still discovered by customers calling into the service desk and complaining, but these two sides of the business don't talk to each other. And so it takes 3 hours of an issue festering in the service desk for someone to realize, hey, I think this might be a systems related issue. We should get operations involved. Well, with AI, you can in real time sense what's going on in your service desk and understand, hey, is there any anomalous behavior? Is there anything trending over there that has to do with the systems that operations has to keep up? You can use agentic eyes on glass instead of spending a bunch of time looking at your observability and setting metrics and thresholds. You can just say, hey, agentic AI, keep a look at all these graphs. And if you see something concerning or anomalous, let us know. So it's a radical rethinking of the data that we can bring to the game of automating operations. That unlocks a lot of things. And that's really the premise underneath our IT knowledge graph is as we go to automate L1 operations and supercharge SMEs, let's really expand that footprint of knowledge that we can bring. And, of course, you don't have to bring all of that at the very beginning. You don't have to tap into bridge calls and, chat history to start. There's a lot of value by putting in your observability, your service management, your plan changes, your run books, all of the already kept assets you have, and just putting that into the IT knowledge graph already lets agentic AI bring very, very meaningful value very, very quickly and very securely as well. So with that, let's get into automating L1 operations. So, like I said, the world is spending about $220 billion just on salaries. Much of it is outsourced to MSPs for L1 operations. Typically, an L1 has to deal with, hundreds or thousands of issues every day, and typically has a 15-minute SLA to figure out, hey, is this a high priority issue? What do I do about it? Or is this a low priority issue? And I'll try to fix this myself and see if it doesn't go away. Well, guess what? In the real world, L1 operators, there's high churn, they're inexperienced, they're fresh out of college, and they take forever to do all of these manual tasks. So, what ideally should be done in a 15-minute SLA takes 45 minutes, requires a lot of phone calls to your SMEs to ask questions, includes a lot of errors, and typically ends up with a very high escalation rate anyway to your highly paid SMEs. And so, our ambition, our vision, our offering is to reduce that into seconds with agentic AI, and really bring you, much higher, better SLAs with much smarter decisions and a heck of a lot more efficiently. So, what does that look like? It looks like this. So if you think through the detection and response kind of life cycle, it's really detect where an incident happens, diagnose its impact on my organization, triage, meaning figure out, do I need to take action on this thing? Who do I need to assign it to? And actually try to do that. And then resolve, which is either try to fix it myself or get it into the right hands of the right person as quickly as possible. We want to automate 100% of this workflow. So with detection, we already have a very, very strong offering around event management that takes all of your observability and correlates that into much higher level insight. And that's very, very powerful. But guess what? Observability, despite all the money being invested there, is still only around 40% of the way large enterprises detect issues. The vast majority of other issues are actually detected, about 50% are detected by your customers calling into the help desk, calling into the service desk and saying, hey, I've got a problem. And the other 10% are issues that are happening to your external providers. Maybe your CDN is having a bad day. Maybe your payment processor is having a bad day. Maybe there's a power outage in Atlanta. Well, modern observability is about looking inside your four walls at your systems. It doesn't really focus on what's happening outside of your four walls. And so our vision for detection is to continue being the market leader in event management around observability, but to also bring service desk observability and public observability. So we're giving 100% of the detection capabilities to your L1s. Next, diagnosis. So typically, if I'm an L1, once I detect an issue, I look for a relevant runbook, and then I run that runbook. It tells me to do a series of checks. Go check these observability tools, log into your server and check vital stats, go check for business impact, go check for other sources of impact. In our philosophy as well, if a 23-year-old engineer in a low-cost labor environment can run a runbook, well, Agentic AI can go run that runbook, and it can do it not only faster, it can do it better because it doesn't get, L1 engineers tend to churn. The average lifespan of an L1 engineer is about 7 months, especially in outsourced MSP. Well, Agentic AI just gets smarter and smarter every day. It learns from your environments. It can also see what's not in your runbook. So typically your runbook is for your known issues, but 40 or 50% of your issues are unknown. And for there, we can bring things like, hey, service history. And have we seen similar incidents like this in the past? How is it resolved? We can look at recent changes. We could look at impact. We can look at all sorts of things that are not in your runbook. And without calling your more expensive resources to ask questions, we can make agentic decisions and help diagnose that. So whether there is a runbook or there is not a runbook, we can fully automate the diagnosis process. Then based on that, we can triage, which is basically set a priority. Is this a SEV 1 where we should send this immediately to your major incident management team? Or is this a minor issue and let's just let it wait for 5 minutes and see if it comes back? We can also make sure, hey, who does this need to be sent to? What is the information that this person needs? And so on and so forth. And then finally, we can resolve. If this is a fairly straightforward, low risk resolution, we can suggest that resolution. And for customers that want, we can also automate that resolution. We can go beyond suggestion to actually go automate. In the case that there needs to be an escalation, we can suggest that escalation, tell you exactly who this issue needs to go to, why this is the right person, who fixed this issue the last time, and then make sure we augment that ticket with all the notes that relevant SME can do. And so bottom line is we can take all of these workflows that your L1 does today manually, expensively, in a very error-prone way, and automate those completely with agentic AI. And so basically think of an existing example. Today, if you have a firewall issue, your L1 will go check the runbook and go execute the runbook. Well, we can do that automatically. In addition to that, outside of the normal checks that live inside your runbook, we can say, hey, are there any correlated changes? Have you had historical incidents in the past that are relevant? Do we have a knowledge base article? None of that lives in a runbook. None of that would be accessible to your L1 today. We can also say, hey, that firewall issue is highly connected to an issue you're having in your network and an issue you're having over here in your cloud. We think these are all symptoms of the same core issue. Well, now you know that. And each one of those issues has its own runbook, and we can go run all of those checks. We can also see, hey, is there an issue with one of my third-party providers? Maybe the issue is not inside of my four walls, but outside my four walls. What's happening in my service desk? Is this having customer impacting issues? What do I do about that? Who do I communicate about that? Who are the business owners that I need to communicate about that? And then based on all that information, I can then make agentic decisions as to impact, priority, root cause, and suggested actions. And I can actually go and help my responders automate their response to those actions, whether suppress, assign, or resolve. That's our vision for end-to-end L1 automation. And like I said, it can help our customers do things better with less errors and more accuracy. You can help them do it faster, significantly faster, because instead of manual workflows that take minutes or hours, we can do it in seconds. And we can do it in a far more cost-effective manner. Now that we've talked about L1 automation, let's talk about supercharging your SMEs. So when you do have a major incident, that's when it sucks in a lot of your most precious resources. In addition to your major incident management team, it calls in a lot of service owners, whether it be developers or cloud architects or network architects, all the people whose day job is building and innovating, but then get called in when you do have a major incident. And that process is usually very chaotic. It involves a lot of people doing a lot of work, doing manual checks into my observability tools and checking these 50 things, looking for relevant recent changes, lots of time with phone calls, lots of time with bridge calls from hell, with 100 people on the line for many, many hours trying to manually and verbally share what they know. A lot of work, but your most expensive, precious resources, all the while you have a major incident going on that's impacting both revenue and customer experience. And so we want to bring very powerful automation to all of that. We want to give a tool that's for everyone who's involved in major incidents, whether that's your major incident management team, where this is their day job, or your service owners and developers and SREs, where innovation is their day job, but they become deputized firefighters when there is an issue. And for those folks, we want to give an assistant that we call Biggie that helps bring automation to the full spectrum of fighting major incidents, both in terms of fighting those fires and in terms of preventing them in the first place. So on the fighting fire side, it's around investigation, collaboration, and automation. We want to give those people that have to do forensic analysis of issues very powerful investigation tools that let them do all the checks they already do, but 10x faster with an interface that is natural language. So instead of opening up an observability tool and doing, any number of checks, and then based on the answers to those checks, you peel the onion, and then you peel the onion, and you peel the onion. All that's still very important, but Agentic AI can do that for you and can do it for you with a very natural, English language chat interface. Um, and so it's a very, very, very powerful tool that can literally make an investigation from something that takes, anywhere from 10 minutes to 5 hours to something that's much more instantaneous. Next is collaboration. When a major incident does happen, there's a lot of bureaucracy around managing, spinning up that incident, managing that incident, keeping people up to date, and after an incident happens, to do postmortems to make sure we get organizational learnings from that incident. We can help fully automate all of that. So when an issue does happen, we can spin up a bridge call. We can invite only the right people. So instead of doing a wide blast radius, let's invite 150 people, we can see, hey, who contributed to the conversation last time we had a similar incident, and who fixed that problem? And that's probably the people we should be inviting in the first place. So we can have a much smaller blast radius, so much less disruption around who gets brought on to those major incident channels or bridge calls, and we can manage that entire process very, very quickly. Then there's automation. So based on investigation and based on all the things that Biggie can do, we give very powerful tools for your SMEs to build smart multi-trigger automation. So traditional, state of the art for today's IT automation is single trigger automation. Hey, if I see this alert in this observability tool, go run that go run that automation. Well, an incident may have not one symptom, they may have hundreds or thousands of symptoms, and the systems might not be the root cause. You can see a lot of things of what's happening with your server layer and your storage and compute. The root cause may have been a security patch that someone updated 3 days ago. And so automation really lets you build, automation not based on single triggers, but on AI reasoning, multi-trigger automation. If you see those things and AI reasoning leads you to conclude this set of reasoning, that's what you want to go trigger those automations. So it's really going from single trigger automation to intelligent multi-trigger automation. All of that is how we help our SMEs fight fires. Then there's how do you prevent those fires in the first place? It turns out that well over half of IT incidents are caused by changes that people introduce into the environment, whether that be code changes, security changes, infrastructure changes, and so on and so forth. Wouldn't it be cool if for change management, we could give you a risk score and help prevent those bad changes from happening. And that's exactly what we're doing with Biggie. We can look at all of the plan changes you have going on across your footprint. And based on AI, based on looking at multiple parameters around that one specific change, we can say, hey, this is a pretty risky change. We think you should flag it. Here's why we think it's a risky change, and here are the items we think you can do to make that change less risky. Or we can say, hey, based on our risk score, this is a very safe change. Go ahead and approve that. So we can give those change management teams really powerful AI-based tool to prevent those 50 to 60% of enterprise issues that are actually self-inflicted wounds by bad changes. And so that's Biggie. That's really our approach to helping our SMEs, supercharging our SMEs to both fight fires much faster, much more efficiently, and give them, their time back to do their day job, which is to innovate, as well as to prevent those issues from happening in the first place. And that's our vision for agentic IT ops. It's really around, automating those L1 operations so you can do the initial detection and triage faster, better, and cheaper. It's around supercharging your operational SMEs so they can investigate issues much, much faster and prevent issues and give themselves time back for their day job. It's around unifying those two operational modalities. Your central operations and your distributed operations can have a common data layer to share their visibility, their processes, and their data. And ultimately, it's around preventing and predicting those issues from happening in the first place. So thank you for joining us. My team is always here to answer more questions. I think it's a very, very exciting time. Everyone knows that agentic AI will disrupt many, many industries. I think operations is very, very ripe for disruption. There's so much manual labor. There's so much fragmented data. It's a very, very ripe ecosystem for agentic disruption.
Thank you, Asaf. I'm glad you brought up questions. We do have some questions from the audience. So let's get started with those. The first is Agentic AI is a newer concept for many. There's also different definitions. Can you talk a little bit about what it means in the context of IT operations and how it's different from traditional automation?
Sure, absolutely. Traditional automation was around, I would call rules-based automation. So you have to have a human being manually build a rule. So it says, when I see a trigger, typically a very specific trigger, like something happening in my network or server, go run this execution. And so those rules had to be built by hand. That's still the state of the industry today. When you get to Agentic AI, you start thinking around advanced reasoning and advanced automation. So it's, hey, I can, instead of saying, hey, I have deterministic rules that have to be built and maintained by hand, I can do AI reasoning. I can tell agentic AI what it needs to be looking for, how it needs to consider complex multi-trigger events, and I can help it use reasoning to understand what's going on much like a human operator would. And then based on that multi-trigger context, actually go make a decision as to what needs to be automated. Before you had to, make sure all of those issues had to be known and planned for ahead of time. And you had to build rules, very, very simple rules, to handle that. Now it's, hey, I can tackle any issue, whether it's a known issue that I've seen many, many times, or it's something that I've never seen before, and I can apply agentic reasoning to automate how I take care of it.
Thank you. Our next question starts with a statement. This sounds like
Yeah.
a big step forward for BigPanda and for the industry at large. Where do you see the future of agentic IT operations heading over the next year?
Um, Well, I think like, many applications of agentic technology can bring automation to, the low-level work that is traditionally done by less experienced, less skilled labor, and it can bring acceleration to your experts. And so if I apply that to ITOps, I think the folks in your L1, Ops Center, NOC, many of them, as I said, are outsourced. The churn in those environments is very, very high. So you're constantly dealing with, low experience, low, what's the word, tenure employees that don't have a lot of context. That is very ripe for automation. And then, there's no shortage of experts, SMEs within IT environments, your developers, your SREs, and so on and so forth. You don't want to automate those people. You do want to accelerate their work. So, accelerate the ability of them to get context so they can make smart decisions and then drive smart automation based on, that experience. And so, that is what we're seeing play out in a lot of verticals. IT operations is not an exception here.
And we're hearing this again and again from customers, correct?
Absolutely. Customers are very hungry to automate L1 and kind of augment their experts. And so I think the next year is going to see a lot of that.
Great. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah,
You've spoken about the IT knowledge graph as a differentiator. Why, again, is unifying structured and unstructured data just so critical for incident management teams today?
sure. Well, I mean, incident management teams are already doing that today. They're merging their structured and their unstructured data, except that they're doing it manually. So there's automation that's happening on the highly structured data. So you can automate with event management how you make sense of observability data, how you make sense of CMDB data, and if there's any other highly structured data, you can use event management to turn that very quickly into insight. But then the other 95% of your enterprise knowledge that's buried in people's emails and chat histories and tools and silos, observability tools, and so on and so forth, that require deeper investigation, all of that is done manually, looking for those semi-structured and unstructured. Humans are looking through your service history. Humans are looking through your Confluence. Humans are making phone calls. The difference now is all that, messy, unstructured, tacit knowledge. Well, AI can use that. You can put that into an IT knowledge graph and make all of that the fuel that powers agentic automation. And so that's a radical rethinking of, the enterprise's approach to data. It's true for many, many verticals that had to rely on highly structured data and now can expand their aperture. And it's absolutely true for IT operations. And the only difference is, that $200 billion worth of operators that had to go uncover and find all of that hidden data, that can now be automated.
Well, that's all the time that we have today. So just thank you, Asaf, for this Q&A, for this session overall. Thank you all to the audience for joining us. We hope that the session gave you a clear view into where IT operations is headed and how BigPanda is really helping lead that agentic transformation. If you'd like to learn more or schedule a personalized session with our team, we would absolutely love to hear from you. And on behalf of all of us at BigPanda, we appreciate your time. I'll turn it back to you, Asaf, for a few final thoughts.
No, ditto. So this is an exciting time. I think the next few years are going to bring a lot of changes, a lot of very exciting opportunities for IT operations, and I'm thrilled to be at the forefront of that.
Great. Thank you, and thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.